Guys, I don't know about you, but I'm riding high off of a football weekend. Complete dominance from all three of my teams. I'm happy to be here. We're going to be talking some Broncos. Bree Maestas, Joey Richards, Zach Seegers. The trio is back. I don't know the last time this happened, guys. I'm pretty excited about it. And I'm also really happy to be talking about a team that is blowing all of my expectations. I'm going to be the first one to admit it. I didn't know if the Broncos could win 6 games. And now it's been a convincing start here. I know it was a little iffy to begin, but you get a close game with the Kansas City Chiefs. You get a dominant performance against the Falcons. And I don't want any of those asterisks there for any injuries or otherwise. But I want to know, how'd you guys fare this weekend? Zach Seegers, I'm going to start with you. Pretty happy about that Buffs win, too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on cloud nine. I think you hit the point about our football teams doing well at all levels, college, NFL. A little quick aside to preps talk. My alma mater, Fairview, going up against your aforementioned team on the 22nd here. We'll have some trash talk this week about that. But I'm on cloud nine. I mean, this has been a long time coming. I started covering the Broncos for Mile High Sports that 2017 season. And even then I was like an intern. The first time I was like really doing Broncos stuff consistently was the 2018 season. It's been a lot of suck. It's been bad. I mean, 8-9 last year was the best I've gotten to deal with. And right now, I think the Broncos have a great chance at reaching the playoffs. And even beyond that, it wouldn't be like last year we were kind of having some playoff talks, or the Drew Lock Teddy Bridgewater year, where like it would have been fun to make the playoffs that year, but there was nothing sustainable to it. There was nothing sustainable, nothing substantive to it, nothing meaningful there. It was all fairy dust that would be there for a season and then go away, like the Washington Commanders making the playoffs in 2020. Who cares about that team? It's like they didn't even exist. This Broncos team isn't the 2020 Commanders or the TJ Yates Texans or whatever other also Rams you want to throw in there. There's something here, and Sean Payton's building it, and Bo Nix is developing, and I don't know where the limit is, but right now the sky's the limit. It'll probably, land somewhere in that top 10 to 12 range. But who knows? Maybe it's top 3. Maybe it's number 1. Who is to say? I'm enjoying it. Let's go. Let's keep riding this roller coaster to the top.
I hate to be Debbie Downer, but Zach, I don't think it'll be number 1. Let's start there.
I don't either. But hey, limitless potential right now.
Limitless potential. I'm here for it. I'm here for the positive vibes. We don't get this very often at Let's Talk Broncos, especially since we started this podcast. It's been around now. Usually I am full on Twitter doing memes. That's where I am about this time of season. Usually I'm on there.
Just the Mountains play sheet.
Yeah, I'm on there. I have a coach to slander in mind. It's all right. Once a week, we got to get something out there to feed the people. Like I'm out there doing something like that. Now it's hard. I really like a lot of what the Broncos are doing. Especially, I like that I'm on a 3-game winning streak of bold predictions. I feel like I could stop right now and maybe win. It's three in a row. I think this might be a Let's Talk Broncos record.
It might be, actually. I can't even talk shit, Joey. I think you're right. But a fancy little note to throw in there. All 3 of our bold predictions hit this last time. I don't know the last time that happened. And usually where we're at this point in the season, Joey, I really wanted to bolster that point, is we're usually infighting at this point. We're talking draft position. We're talking the stock down, like, oh yeah, at least that was good, but everything else was deplorable. Like, we are in a great time that I want all of Broncos country to chime in on. So everyone in the chat, tell me how you're feeling about Sunday's game. Heck, you can even throw in all the nitpicky stuff that you want to get into today, because we do need some stock downs. We need to balance it all out, because I feel like I'm too high right now. And I don't mean off that good Colorado THC. I mean, I'm too high on this team right now, and I'm not able to roll myself off of that. Thanks for the laugh at me, Zach.
Thank you. No,
I felt like that was appropriate for that time.
Reminded me of my mom talking about weed. It was really delightful. I enjoyed it.
Hi, Tira. Yeah, so I want to hear all of the feedback. So if you're watching over on Twitter, you can comment over there, but we'd really appreciate if you joined us over in the YouTube chat. I see a bunch of the regulars in here, LTB Muse, Paul, Samuel Castro. Good to see all ya. Oh, Rock's here too. Second one in the chat though, second place, not first. Let's get it rolling. And wanted to talk about where we're at as far as the wins go and why it's more than just, I guess, it's not just the wins and losses. It's the opportunity to talk about meaningful football in November and December. Now, there was those seasons where there was a 7% chance and everybody in desperately in Broncos country was trying to figure out what would have to happen for the non-zero chance to not slip through the fingers. But the idea here is that the Broncos have a convincing road to the playoffs, and the Falcons game was a huge one in order to make that happen. And how are you guys? I still feel hesitant talking about that, but that's because we haven't been able to reach that precipice. We have the second longest drought for the playoffs, and it almost feels like if I get a little too high on this, I'm setting myself up for a world of disappointment. But it's hard not to, seeing this team come together and in a way where even I'm buying into this Sean Payton stock. I'm looking for forgiveness when I'm talking about this team and their ability and their, I guess, their track and path to put it all together. It's happening before our eyes, but it still leaves me a little bit of, well, yeah, but we'll get screwed out of the playoffs because a team like the Chargers or the Bengals will figure out a way. But they seem to be having their own issues. Zach, I want you to talk to me about the AFC West, the playoff picture. What does it look like? Like, is it okay to be a little hopeful right now? I think 50% is where we were kind of hanging out last week.
Yeah, I think it's plenty okay to be hopeful. I think they've got like a 2/3 chance right now. It's 60 some percent. I don't know it off the top of my head, but 3 out of 5, 2/3 chance somewhere in there. And I think you should feel great about that. I think the odds are probably better than even the numbers are reflecting because this team is playing their best football right now. The defense is still playing really great. That Ravens game was the mirage instead of their performances against bad quarterbacks being the mirage. And the offense is peaking at the right time. Bo Nix is a lot more comfortable and is playing good football. He's near a top 10 level right now. I don't, not to say he's a top 10 quarterback. I think we're a way off from solidifying anything like that, but EPA per dropback, success rate, isolate it by third down, look at passing touchdowns, look at passing yards, look at total touchdowns, look at completion percentage, any metric you want to pull out there, touchdown interception ratio. He's top 10 over the last month and a half of football. If you are getting top 10 production, let's set play aside because that's subjective. If you're getting top 10 production from the quarterback position and you have a top 5 defense, you're going to win a lot of football games. Look at Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Granted, that's Mahomes, but that's been their entire formula on this potential three-peat is we're going to do just enough on offense. We've got a quarterback playing really well and our defense is lights out. So I think that lines up well for the Broncos. And then the schedule is great. That also just the field in general. The Dolphins and Bengals have almost no margin for error each. They can maybe afford one loss. The Dolphins can't even. They pretty much have to win out. The Bengals can afford a loss if they upset the Broncos in that Week 17 game. But even then, you're requiring, if they have that other loss, wins out across the rest of the way. They haven't played the Steelers yet this season. For example, there's tough games remaining on that Bengals schedule. The Colts are the only team within a game of the Denver Broncos. Next week, the Colts get the Detroit Lions when the Broncos get the Raiders. Then the Broncos will get the Browns. And then there's a bye week, and then they get the Colts. There's a good chance that Colts game off a bye week at home in Denver with Anthony Richardson going up against a nightmare pass rush is to lock up a playoff spot. And I love the Broncos' chances in that spot.
I think it's interesting right now because the Broncos have like 3 tiebreaker type games left on their schedule. You brought up all of them, Zach. They play the Chargers again, which is a big deal for the Broncos. That's a game that they should have to win. They play the Colts, who are right below the Broncos and fighting for that playoff spot. And then they play one more. It is the Bengals this year, which is right below the Broncos as well. All of these games are huge. I mean, if it came down to it and the Colts had the same record as the Broncos, if they win that game this season, they'd have the tiebreaker and would get in. These are massive games, and I think it kind of sets up well. Like I don't think the Colts are an unbeatable team. We've seen quarterback like in and out stuff going on down there. We saw Joe Flacco. Now Anthony Richardson is back in. The Bengals just lost to the Chargers, and I think the Chargers are a beatable football team, although they kind of stomped the Broncos earlier. I will say this Broncos team does look different as just the season has progressed. Even since that Chargers game, I think they're playing their best ball now. It's just interesting how the schedule lays this out. I think all of these are must-win type games, right? The only one, what's the tough one on the schedule? Like the toughest game you have left is the Chiefs. You have them back at home to end the season. It could come down to even that game. All of these games are huge right now for the Broncos playoffs hopes. There's not a single one on here where it doesn't change the Broncos trajectory pretty drastically.
I think you get a lot of solace with the Chiefs being that last game because you're hoping they're resting their starters. They've got it all lined up and they don't need to necessarily play them. I think that's always been our carry-all for every time the Chiefs are the last game of the season. But you're right. I think that they're all pretty important games. And the fact that we're talking about the importance of this game or these games upcoming is super important. But the Chargers, they're starting to, I don't know if it's get hot or if they're starting to really click into place, but Harbaugh has them running at a higher click than I anticipated this season. So I feel like that game in itself is going to be the most challenging. Seeing a Sean Payton go up against a Jim Harbaugh is maybe not something I was really looking forward to all season, but now that the Broncos have really started to make a name for themselves, I don't think people are really discounting them as much. Although it's wild to wake up from the last 2 weeks of play and see that the national media continues to kind of second guess them as well. I think that's a little bit of compensation, right? I think it's the same hesitancy you would feel as a fan, but now as a national media member, you can't buy into the hype too much. I know what we're watching, right? We see it week in and week out. The development of Bo Nix is week in and week out. It's things are getting fixed in real time. You're seeing more confidence from him. It's not taking all game to unravel. It's sort of happening in this way where you're like, okay, all of these things I had concerns about are no longer concerns. So what do I do now, right? I have to nitpick at it. But it does bring up an interesting conversation. Initially, it felt like Jaden Daniels was running away with the Rookie of the Year conversation. But now it seems like Bo Nix is putting on quite the show for the conversation surrounding him being the front runner now. Are you guys buying into that? Joey, I'm going to go to you first on this one because I want to know what's that conversation like for a Bo Nix for Rookie of the Year, and why is Bo Nix proving that, not just for the Broncos country fandom, but where do you sit on that conversation? Is he doing enough now? What would he need to do? Make the playoffs or bust? Because it looks like Daniel's slowing down a little bit and Bo Nix is putting up record numbers. Where do you fall?
That's kind of it. You kind of nailed it right there, Brie, at the end, where it was like, it feels like they're on opposite trajectories at the moment. Now, everything could change going into the future, but right now it feels like Jane Daniels' stats, at least production, have been dipping while Bo Nix's have been going way up. And then at the beginning of the season, Jane Daniels started so up here and Bo Nix started so low down here, which is where we are now, where it's like, okay, I'm looking at the numbers pretty even across the board, right? And I'm not even going to talk about the play because let's all be honest with each other. These guys aren't getting voted in for any other reason than the box score numbers. That's why they're going to be offensive rookie of the year. So yeah, I think if Bo Nix keeps up how he's playing right now, he has a very real shot. He has more touchdowns than Jane Daniels does, which I think is a big stat. Jane Daniels, I think, has a little more passing yards and a little more rushing yards at the moment. But it is really close. It's really close. I think it's neck and neck. I don't have one above the other right now. Just looking off the box score. I mean, if I were doing a prediction, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think it lines up really good for Bo Nix. You know, it would be one thing if Jaden Daniels was leading a playoff team in Washington and the Broncos didn't have one, but kind of to our last point, the Broncos are in pretty good shape here. I don't think they're walking on a razor's edge. They can afford to frankly lose a couple games and still make it because of how bad the rest of the AFC field is and the lead they've already gotten themselves. There's only one team inside of a game, the Denver Broncos right now. So I think that is a huge plus in Bo Nix's category. I don't know, Bo Nix's side. The box score stats, as Joey cited, over this last month and a half, 2 months of football, he has the advantage there. And that advantage might continue to go that way because Cliff Kingsbury has a career-long trend. Look at it at USC last year, at Texas Tech when he had Patrick Mahomes, or, with Kyler Murray in Arizona. Through September, October, he has some pretty elite offenses, and November and December, they become more mediocre. I just looked at 2021. He got fired after 2022. So let's not look at the worst of Cliff. Let's look at 2021. Kyler had some MVP buzz that season. Had, a Cardinals team that started the year pretty undefeated. I think they were like 8-0, 9-0. Had that crazy Hail Mary with DeAndre Hopkins against the Bills, right? Final stretch, that from week 9 to the end of the season, they're 13th in EPA per dropback. The Denver Broncos, with a hodgepodge combo of Teddy Bridgewater and New York Giants third string quarterback Drew Lock, are 15th in 2021 in that same time span. Plus, Jaden Daniels just hasn't looked himself since the rib damage. He doesn't look like the guy that was running away with this award beforehand. If both those trends continue, actually, if all three of these, if those continue and Bo plays anything like he has these last 2 weeks, he's got a very good chance. Now, Vegas still has it at like plus 1,500. So he is still a long shot, admittedly, but the path is certainly there for him.
Now would be a good time to put your money down then, Zach. That's what that means.
Yeah, that's true. You got to lay out just a bunch of cash on that one if you're going to go that strong in there. I just want you to know, Zach Seegers, Drew Lock is the backup
to the backup.
No. They technically, if you want to be a jerk about it, sure, but technically, DeVito is the starting quarterback and Daniel Jones is on the bench as the third string. I want you to get the facts straight if you're going to talk about football, okay? Not any of this narrative streaming bullshit that you want to throw in my face. Anyways,
if the Giants want to pick a quarterback, their first choice this season, Daniel Jones. Their second choice this season, Tommy DeVito. Their third choice this season, hypothetically, Drew Lock. I guess we don't know that yet. I don't want to put the cart ahead of the horse, but it does seem like it would be the third choice.
They went with Drew Lock before they went with DeVito.
Not to start a game. DeVito wasn't activated.
But they yanked
the Rucks
him.
Emergency quarterback.
So they weren't like, "Hey, Tommy Cutlets, come in for Daniel Jones." No, they put their backup quarterback. Anyways, I digress.
I love it. This is throwback to first year of Let's Talk About This. Right,
full circle.
Exactly what happened. I sat there and looked at Zach and Bree while they argued.
Rubbing your hands together.
Yeah. Trying to figure out a way
better than this. Guys, fantastic rookie numbers from Bo Nix, regardless of what the conversation looks like there. But I think somebody threw out also, and I want to blame James Palmer for this, intentionally or not intentionally, because I think he does have a point here. Brock Bowers also being in that conversation is something that we should all consider. And I am maybe just a little bit jealous there, right? But would you have traded out those picks? No, not at this point, not in any sort of hindsight or whatever. But it's nice to have tight end production, weaponry, any sort of that, because that is the kind of joker wild card versatility piece that a Sean Payton would be looking for. And it's hard not to be a little bit envious.
Yeah, I think before Bo Nix front, I don't think Brock Bowers should steal it from him. It's a pretty quarterback heavy award. I get the film guys and James Palmer highlighting him, but I ultimately don't think he's too much of a threat to Bo Nix's chance of winning the award. That said, there's a reason James Palmer and all these film guys are saying this. He looks great. He's, I think, only second to George Kittle in receiving yards among tight ends right now. And it sucks. The moment it was like, okay, Travis Kelce, 2024, finally over the hill. This guy, he's still a player, but he's not the nightmare he used to be. And we got this Brock Bowers guy we're going to see twice a year for the next decade now. He looks fantastic. I think, how Palmer phrased it was he's probably the best offensive rookie at their given position.
Yeah.
And I'd agree with that. Like, I think Brock Bowers is, inarguably a top 5 tight end in the league this year. And I think you are smoking crack if you say Bo Nix is inarguably the top 5 quarterback this year. So I get it on that front, but quarterbacks win awards.
Just got to point out that Matthew Perry said the magic word, so Joey gets to respond. The Broncos had potential at tight end for years, never worked out. Jake Butt, Dulcich, such a bummer. Joey.
Yeah, no, see, you're mistaken here, Matthew Perry, because the Broncos have been suiting up a different version of Jake Butt since Jake Butt. That's really the issue right now. We've had Adam Troutman, also known as Jake Butt. We've had Jeff Hireman, also known as Jake Butt. We've had Jake Butt on our team forever. I don't know what you're talking about.
The Dulcich injuries really are just a product of all the wear and tear at this point. It's been a decade of the charade.
just keeps growing the hair out and hoping that nobody will recognize him. It's like a backwards Where's Waldo. Joey, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for humoring me by giving me a rant that I did not so eloquently try to segue into. I just really told you exactly what I needed there. So you nailed it. You hit it out of the park. But it is interesting. It's interesting to see the decisions that have been made positionally for the Denver Broncos through the years. Right now, they're in a prime spot of opportunity to start collecting weapons for what their vision is. And when I say they, I mean Sean Payton specifically is now getting to mastermind this entire thing around the quarterback that he chose, and then has now been able to really prove that he got his guy and he was able to make the moves to guarantee success. And now I know the season's not over, a lot can happen, et cetera, but I don't believe that the development is going to go backwards. I think we've now seen and proven that the ceiling could be a lot higher than we were anticipating.
Yes.
And now it's all about slotting weapons around Bo Nix in order to increase that success. Guys, I'm all for it, and I'm feeling pretty excited about what that notion means. But what it also means is that the skill players on this team are now being tasked with the opportunity to do things that you wouldn't normally see in a bland offense as we've been accustomed to in, let's say, a Pat Shurmur era. So the idea here is that you're seeing a lot of fun, either player personnel combinations, or you're seeing a Marvin Mims finally get the snaps that we've been pleading for in a role that doesn't necessarily fit where your expectations would have been. Now, I know the guys over on Altitude Adjustment had been talking about it a little bit, but it felt like a little bit of a stretch. Now you're seeing Marvin Mims' success, throwing him in the backfield, being able to design things specifically. What I like to categorize this is as, and it's going to go against what I've been saying here on Let's Talk Broncos, so go ahead and chide me and call me wrong, is the idea that Sean Payton is designing this offense for the pegs to fit into the holes. And he's not trying to force specific instances that have been the ways of the past where you're like, I want to run this offense, but I don't have the players. He's running the offense that's fitting these key players. And instead of having this conversation of we don't have the stars, we don't have the manpower, we don't have all of those things that we've been talking about for what seems like years and years and years, is that now working with what you've got seems to be the best way forward until you can build. Zach, I'm going to throw it over to you for what you heard of that conversation as you decided to dismiss yourself. And I don't know, greet the door-by-door salesman that you were talking to.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. Seventh-day Adventist at the door. Had to deal with that. But yeah, in terms of Marvin Mims, I think this is huge on a lot of different fronts. The Broncos invested a lot into Marvin Mims. And as we've talked about a lot in terms of the dead cap, in terms of the picks they've traded for Russ, for Riley Moss, for Sean Payton, they've left themselves a fairly thin margin for error in terms of their resource allocation. So getting something out of, a second round pick you traded up for is huge. And now they're getting something out of this guy. He's not a glorified Montrell Washington where he's just being relegated to special teams. Hopefully it becomes a more substantial receiving role eventually. But I always think about this with quarterbacks. If you're so much of a tire fire, you're just never going to get the reps. You don't have a chance to ever develop and kind of reach that point of mediocrity. Like we're seeing even Joe Flacco is not a good example this year, but like Joe Flacco last year, he had enough reps that when you threw him in there, you knew what he was doing, unlike Tyler Huntley with the Dolphins this year. There's something to be said for getting that. think the same's true for a lot of different positions. But in this case, if Mims was just a returning specialist, they get to the end of that rookie deal and probably let him walk. He probably doesn't get any offensive snaps to continue to further that receiver development, maybe allow him to become something more. Now he's going to get a consistent offensive workload probably throughout the rest of this season. And there's a good chance it carries into next season too. I mean, if that's the case, that's how you that's an avenue to developing the other receiving gifts. So he doesn't just have to be this one piece gadget player forever. And maybe he is just that, in which case, great. You found a fun little weapon. This team needs juice. Bo Nix needs some sort of explosive weapon, and Mims can provide that. So that's exciting. And, credit to Sean Payton for finding this clever solution to the problem.
That's mostly what I want to touch on here is that, I mean, it feels like, so I was heavy on this podcast, right? I think everyone would remember Zach and I even arguing about it. And I think we both ended up being correct here, if I'm being honest. We both of us were right. And it goes.
This is some funny cope, Joey.
This isn't cope at all. This is true.
Marvin Mims breakout year. He meant breaking out at running back.
No. I wasn't saying the breakout year. I was saying we need to play. What I'm referring to is what I'm saying is that I was heavy on this podcast talking about the Broncos need to insert Marvin Mims. The Broncos have no yards after catch ability at all on the field. That's what I was saying. I was saying that I don't even care if he's a downgrade from Josh Reynolds or anything like that. It's an upgrade just in the fact that you get some yards after catch ability. Like, yes, he might be a pound for pound worse player, but we need to play him because we're lacking that skill set. Meanwhile, Zach was saying, dude, I don't think he's a receiver, really. I don't think he's a guy that can go out there and line up and run routes. And I just think that if he was worthy of playing, he'd be on the field. Now, it feels like Sean Payton took what we both were saying, Zach, and we're like, I have a really creative idea here. I'm going to make him Deebo Samuel's light. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm going to try to do with him. I'm going to put him in the backfield where running routes and stuff like that isn't as much of it isn't that big of a deal. Like, he's a better route runner than any of the Broncos running backs they have, right? I'm going to make him a receiving option back there. I'll also hand him the ball. And then at wide receiver, he's just going to be a downfield and screen guy, which, I mean, this effectively tackles the issue at hand, which is we have no yards after catch ability at all, right? And we saw it. It just brings more explosiveness to the offense, and I think Sean Payton deserves a ton of credit. What we're seeing is a guy that literally could not get on the field. We saw, not even that he couldn't get on the field, we saw a decrease in snaps over time. It was Troy Franklin all of a sudden started eating his snaps. Now to the point where we took a 0 and made him into a positive on a creative in-season adjustment. I don't think many coaches are doing this. I don't think many coaches are even trusting the player to be like, hey, here's a different role for you. Pick it all up. Let's go. And then the player pick it all up and he's going. I think all of this is super creative and different. I think Sean Payton deserves a ton of credit for it. And I also think Marvin Mims deserves credit for picking up a different role. It's exciting. It's new. I don't know how much shelf life it has. That's what I'm going to be looking out for going into the future. Is this kind of one of those things that you throw out there for a couple games and it works until teams start scheming around it? That is the main question I have to this point. But nonetheless, it's exciting, it's creative, and it's new.
Joey, I think that's what's the important adaptability, though, is that you're able to throw those things out there. And like, if your offense is standing pat throughout the entire season and you're not trying to strategize against the defenses you're going to be playing against, I think that's where you've lost the sauce there. I think it would be intriguing to see how this offense continues to adapt in its environment. And that includes, we're never quite sure who's going to be in the backfield with Audric Estime and Javonte Williams kind of splitting and switching, and maybe one game's a little bit higher here for utilization. I think it's just important to note that is continuously evolving here for the Denver Broncos. Samuel Castro wants to know, what do you guys think of little Jordan Humphrey on his receiver role? Now, I want to point out Zach Seegers had a little bit of pushback on little Jordan Humphrey there for a second during Sunday, and then he immediately caught a touchdown. So let's talk about it. I
Over to you, Zach.
thought
Let
that
us
was
know.
a drop.
I'm ready for this.
There's
This is
been
not
some
the
loud. Oh, I know. It's not the critique that I'm making it to be. It's the only way I can set you up in a way that makes me feel good about myself. So play along and have some fun here as we dive into what I thought was a drop ball ended up not being a dropped ball for little Jordan Humphrey. And there's a lot, I think, of appropriate frustration with the receivers and how they continue to maybe let down Bo Nix in some key plays. The drops that we've seen from individuals or fumbles, everything has been on big plays that Bo Nix needed to have some efficiency down the field, get those first downs, and continue these drives to the Broncos to put some points on the board, right? So why not be upset with these? But what do we think about little Jordan Humphrey and his fit here with the Denver Broncos and moving forward and all of the odds and ends of what it looks like? Because I don't think that he's somebody you would want to part ways with. But what have you seen out of him this season and specifically Sunday in his role here with the Broncos?
I'm going to go the exact opposite direction. I think this is a guy you want to part ways with. I think it's very possible the Broncos don't. Their weapon, this group of weapons have a long ways to go. I think like you need 2 tight ends better than your number 1 tight end right now. Like one that's a better blocker, one that's a better pass catcher. 2 more useful tight ends, maybe is a better way of framing it. I think you need, I don't know, 3 receivers, 2 of Sutton's caliber or better, I'd say. You need another running back to help out Audric Estime in there. Like there's a good bit of rounding out that needs to be done. And not all of that's going to be accomplished this offseason. And if as a result, Lil Jordan Humphrey is a practice squad guy that's getting called up, occasionally and is seeing some work, I think that's fine. I don't think he should be the centerpiece of the offense that he's been at points this year. I think that would be really concerning. But I agree. Like he's had nice moments. There's positives to his game. What he brings to the run game as a blocker is nice. His after the catch ability. Joey was talking about our conversation earlier in the season about Marvin Mims. When we were begging for something, it was like, damn, his little Jordan Humphrey might be the best this team has right now.
He was,
so,
by the way. There's no question.
Like, there's a niche there for him. It's just I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze. The mistakes are backbreaking and very frequent. And he's serviceable in those other areas, but I don't think he's some huge asset either. So I think it's a guy you're hoping you can improve upon. But the Broncos have a lot of areas to address this offseason, not even to mention trying to keep this great defense intact. So I won't be livid if he stays around. I think the fan base probably has too much hatred for him because of those glaring mistakes. But, I don't think you want him to be that much of a contributor. The Broncos were able to bring him back on a vet minimum contract with like almost no guaranteed money and had little competition to bring him back for a reason.
Yeah, I think the answer to the little Jordan Humphrey thing is a little more nuanced than what most people are saying, like just on the timeline or in comment sections or just hearing people. And I watch the game with other people. I do understand everybody. Like, yes, the Broncos should be looking to upgrade from little Jordan Humphrey. It's no question. It's just that the answers I hear thrown out there, 99% of the time, people just don't fundamentally, like, they have no idea what his role is on the team. Sean Payton's looking, the way I would explain it, what that role is and what Sean Payton is looking for out of the role that little Jordan Humphrey's playing. He's looking for almost an extended tight end, like a guy that's almost in that hybrid role. That's what he's looking for in there because the blocking is so important for him, right? That is so important for him at that position. And little Jordan Humphrey is a really good blocker. I saw someone in the comments say when Josh Reynolds is back, play him in front of little Jordan Humphrey. I think that's a fair answer, but I also don't think like, hey, why isn't Troy Franklin in that spot? Why isn't Marvin Mims in that spot? Why, like all these names I've seen thrown out there that I don't think people totally understand the role that he's playing on this team and why he currently is in that role. He's the best that the Broncos have at the current moment in that role. And yes, he's made massive mistakes. They should be looking to upgrade from him this offseason. I'm just speaking about right now. People that are talking about bench him right now, I don't think you really have a straight answer there. You're muted. I have to tell you, you're muted.
I read the screen. I knew it was going to happen too.
Damn it. I like Devon Villay. I'm not muted anymore. Sorry, that adore. Devon Villay, I think, is maybe one answer they can lean more into there. He's not the blocker that LGH is, but I also have liked what we've seen from him in that regard. From just the size aspect, he has some of that too. He's definitely one of the 3 best receivers on this team, so I think maximizing his snaps just makes basic sense on that front. But yeah, I love how Joey talked about how he's kind of this wide receiver tight end hybrid player. I think that Peyton would have loved if Dulcich became this guy. Remember all the Dulcich hype we were seeing that first offseason Peyton got here. Next year, maybe these are snaps getting gobbled up by Tyler Warren or was it Colston Loveland or one of these other kind of hybridy good athlete tight ends in the draft. There's a lot of good options for the Broncos here.
Yeah, I mean, this is the role we saw Colston play in a little bit. This is the role that Colston played in when Marquise Colston with Sean Payton was really, really good. There's a reason why you never saw him with the Wes Welker type in that role. And I just think that's something people need to remember, or just, I just think they need to remember
that. Yeah, absolutely. I was going to point out all the comments talking about Vele. He's been consistent from victory lap. Rock Walker says he's been dependable. Love that. Love good, dependable wide receiver. Jason had one that I fully agreed with, and it makes me want to get my Vele jersey. I can't find it now. I'm failing you, Jason, but he, saying that he's dominant. I think these are a third down assassin. I like that too. Like, you need a wide receiver. We all wish we could have a number 1 wide receiver on our team. Like a Jamar Chase comes to mind. That's the easy one, right? That you pick. But I think oftentimes that you need to be a little bit more moldable when talking about that, especially with a growing quarterback. Like, eventually, yes, a high caliber duo of wide receivers would look mighty pleasant in this offense. But for what you're presently dealing with, right, I think we can agree that it hasn't been good enough, but it wasn't designed to be good enough. It was designed to be good enough right now. And I think that's what's happening. So I agree with both of you, and I appreciate your thoughts on that. I got my initials wrong. It's fine. It's been a long day. D Bronx says, I like Cortland Sutton. Hey man, I like Cortland Sutton too. There's some loud, splashy plays that we love to harp on. I know I was doing it a lot last season with Jerry Jeudy. And when they're loud and they're big splash plays and they're important, as Zach was pointing out, with Lil Jordan, that it can be incredibly uninspiring to continue to think that that's how the ways of old will continue into the ways of new. So don't worry, Broncos country. This is a good conversation to be having, right? That we're able to say, okay, now what, right? Because it used to be, well, who's throwing to them? Well, now it's Bo Nix. Build the damn statue. We're being raised from the pits of hell presently. Remember where you were when we were having these conversations. I'm kind of screwing around with you, but not really. Guys, I want to know, out of all of the games that have happened this season, was this the most convincing one for the defense? Not just the offense, defense. Not just for the Broncos. Like, you can touch on both, right? I would say yes, across the board, right? The Falcons were not supposed to be a team that was just going to roll over. We all, I guess, predicated our bold predictions on the idea that they were, but right, that's more hopefulness than it is like the reality of the situation. I thought it would have been a little bit more evenly matched, but at a certain point, when you see Kirk Cousins just come out of the game entirely because they've rolled over, then you have to question whether or not the Broncos really shot that one home and put a nail in the coffin and said, that's all, folks. This was convincing. Now, it was a ramp up and a back-to-back emphasis of you almost beat the Chiefs and then you roll the Falcons. That convinces me pretty steadfast that this is a team that is going to fight like hell to get back to the playoffs. So we're all in that kind of present mindset. But I want to know from a defensive point of view, we've been singing their praises this entire season. Joey was slotting them in the top 3 defenses during this offseason. It's not like we have not been here, but now that they're making such a compelling case, and Vance Joseph and Jim Leonard continue to do what they're doing, and you're actually starting to see these stars develop in real time, right? Like the conversation surrounding a Riley Moss or a Nick Bonito or a Jonathan Cooper. Maybe it was a lot of hopefulness and well, it could be this, but now we've seen the development of all of these players sort of take this skyrocketing trajectory for the midpoint in the season. So I kind of want to know how we feel about that. And Zach, I'll throw it over to you for the convincing part. Is there a player that stands out specifically, kind of lending to that narrative that we're talking about right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a very convincing win. Seems like the most convincing. I think the Steelers is up there, in terms of maybe the Seahawks. That was
no. It's the Bucks game. That's the one you're forgetting. The Bucks game was dominant from the defense, and that was off of Baker, I think, beating the Lions the week before, if I'm not mistaken, and putting up a lot of points on them.
Yeah, that was a good one too.
And held him to 6. With Godwin, he looked like an MVP at the time as well. And that was like a Riley Moss showcase that game.
Yeah, this defense, I think, has had a lot of good performances. I don't think any measure up to taking this pretty elite offense and holding them to 6 points, especially when so much of the game was garbage time. There would have been plenty of time. Like I think the Raiders had a garbage time touchdown. There's been a few where they've been shutting a team out or pretty close to it, and they've let a garbage time score in, or so, like the Seahawks game. They end up giving up 26 points in that game. It was a defensive throttling for 90% of it, and then just kind of let them get some points at the end. The fact that so much of this game was garbage time, non-competitive in the back, in the second half, Sean Payton's playing Jonah Ellis and Dondre Atoman as his primary edge defenders. You can't really do that at corner, but that's your other premium position. And you're like, hey, let's get the young guys some reps. And they still held an elite offense to 6 points, and an offense that, like the Athletic was hyping up as well. This is going to be a great matchup. His offense can really give the Broncos problems when you look at how the Broncos want to play, all this man heavy, blitz heavy stuff. Falcons can give that a lot of trouble. And you saw Vance Joseph pivot. And I think that's the other element of this that makes it maybe the most convincing is not only was it so dominant, not only did it come against a great opponent at all those other categories, he did it left-handed. This is not the way the Broncos want to necessarily beat people, with people dropping out and only rushing forward and being really zone heavy. But they understood that's what this opponent called for. They did it, and they, shut down the Falcons better than any other defense has this season.
It was really impressive. It was funny. I thought, it felt like in that first quarter, Jaquan McMillan was being attacked. It felt like they were like, oh, we want nothing to do with Riley Moss and Pat Surtain. Not only is Jaquan McMillan being attacked, we're motioning stuff at him. We're making his life difficult. That's what it was. But the Broncos defense really stepped up even after that first drive, where it felt like the Falcons kind of saved the Broncos on some flags there. It was obvious that the defensive front was going to dominate. Bijan was ripping some, he was having some good runs on that first series, but still I was looking at it. And this is why result or, the process over result, the process of the Broncos defensive line was still good. Bijan Robinson is a really good running back. It's like, this isn't going to come back to the mean. And it ended up, it did. The Broncos defense was dominant. They were really, really good. This is all with a safety that after the Ravens game, I had no belief in. I'll be honest with you. Auden Key, I was scared when I saw him have to enter the lineup, and the Broncos dominated with him in it, right? It's been really cool to see this Broncos defense take off. I think Vance Joseph deserves a ton of credit, and for how critical of Vance Joseph I have been in the past, he should probably be getting looked at as a head coach this next offseason. That's something that I think people need to talk about. He's going to go. He already has experience at it. He can go to a different team and be their head coach. He's been being really good. So I got to eat some crow on that. Vance has proven me wrong. Great job, Vance Joseph.
And the
Samuel Cat. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, and Broncos country should be rooting for that with Vance Joseph. If Vance Joseph gets hired away for a head coaching job, you get 2 third-round picks. Also, you're losing one of the people involved with this defense. I think you're losing either Jim Leonard to take a defensive coordinating job elsewhere, or you're losing Vance Joseph to take a head coaching job elsewhere. I think very highly of Jim Leonard. I think most people in the NFL or college football world do. And if he leaves, you don't get 2 third-round picks. Again, this team could use any resources imaginable. I think this defense will keep rolling without Vance Joseph. I wish him nothing but the best as a head coach next season. Give us those picks.
Yeah, that's absolutely going to happen. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, which is why the conversation of winning like a Super Bowl or, going far into the playoffs, it's a difficult task for teams due to the turnover from coaching staffs to players and et cetera. But right now we can relish in the fact that this defense is nothing to shake a stick at, and this offense is coming along quite nicely. Samuel Castro said JFM was a beast on Sunday. Absolutely, Samuel. There are players from all across this defense that continue to really step out and step above where the expectations were for them to start this season. One of them that comes to mind for me is a Zach Allen, where I thought, this is his breakout season. We thought we saw it last year, but no, we're seeing it this year. Another individual who comes to mind is a Nick Bonito. Obviously getting Cooper what he deserved, it has been great. But the idea here too is Bonito's on an 8-game hot streak of sacks, and you can't slow him down. You can hold him all you want, but he's still being able to get off that edge in a way and in anticipation where it's like, where was this? Is this what George Paton had seen during the scouting days that warmed him to his heart so greatly? Are we seeing the year of Bonito that really shows the growth and development at that position? We know that obviously along that line and where you're playing as Bonito takes a little bit of development time. And not to say that he was necessarily struggling. It just maybe wasn't enough to justify the pick. Zach, where are you now at with a Nick Bonito? How is he performing this year? And let's just give him some flowers.
Man, I could not be higher, or at the very least, it would be very, very hard for me to be higher. I think the Broncos are going to be shelling out a lot of money. Is this what George Paton was seeing? It must have been what he had in mind or something. Was he seeing it? I didn't watch that game of Nick Bonito if he was seeing it, because good Lord, this guy's amazing. I didn't love him in the Big 12 because, he had a good pressure rate and all that stuff, but it felt like he was just winning a lot. By kind of being a better athlete and not letting guys really get their hands on him. I think he's got a lot of really legit pass rush wins this year. I think there's substance there. It is meaningful. It's not just empty calories. And then the run game stuff. He's definitely not a stalwart there. He's not Will Anderson. He's not Myles Garrett or anything, but he's a respectable player there. I don't think he's a complete liability. He's not a guy like Bryce Huff, where it's just pass rushing juice and is a complete problem to the point you can't even think about playing him on early downs. Like Joey and I were talking about. We were talking about this guy having a ceiling as a good developmental pass rusher, a designated pass rusher. And even if that is still his clear strength and what his game revolves around, he's too good to be relegated to a third down role this season. That was obvious when Baron Browning was on this team and the early down snap counts were so heavily leaning towards Bonito. So I just think it's tremendous. Get ready to pay this guy. You mentioned the streak. The only guy he hasn't sacked over the last since week 3 is Lamar Jackson, and Lamar Jackson's probably the most unsackable quarterback in the league this season. Since week 3 he's got 9. That's 2.5 behind the league leader. It's a good thing they locked up Jonathan Cooper for a bit of a bargain, because break off a big hunk of dough for Bonito and another one for Zach Allen. Everyone's excited about T. Higgins and whatnot. Maybe the Broncos' big splashes are just, let's lock these guys up for the future and keep that front looking nasty.
Yeah, I think so. I wrote an article about Bonito after the Broncos drafted him, and I was rereading it the other day. And I think the point of that he still is kind of situational in a perfect world is very true, but it's also to the fact that I think people take that as such a big negative, that if a guy is like in a perfect world, I want him rushing the passer or not defending the run. They take that so like, oh my God, the Broncos just wasted a pick then. That's not the case, because if you can get after the quarterback, you are going to be really good in the NFL, get large paydays, and be super valuable. And that's kind of what Nick Bonito is proving. He is playing more run downs. He's kind of taken over that role, honestly, for the Broncos. Is he amazing at it? No, he's not amazing at it. I don't think that's his bag, really. But when he's able to line up, get after the passer, he's really awesome. He's everything you would have hoped for. You even get to see him on some spies, some quarterback spies, dropping back in coverage every once in a while on some of these exotic blitzes Vance Joseph throws, which is another thing that was really impressive about him when he was coming out of Oklahoma. He was almost kind of an inside linebacker edge hybrid, and you're able to see a little of that. I think Nick Bonito being so good is the reason why the Broncos are willing to move off of Baron Browning. Very similar players, right? Skill set wise, even ceiling wise. I'm looking at him like in downs, I want to play you. Very similar. When I want to drop you guys back, both in coverage, both positives for you guys, right? Like very similar skill sets and in situations I want to play them. And I think Bonito has kind of made himself he made himself money, and I think it's going to be on the Broncos. That's something I want to say. Just that's what that Browning move kind of points to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know we're almost done here. I want to throw one little thing at Joey quick, just because I love his draft expertise. And I'm excited for the draft this year, but not in the way it's been in the past where it's like, oh, season's over. What, top 5 pick can I try and get excited about? I'm excited for the draft in the sense that, man, the Broncos got something to build towards now. What's that next exciting piece in the puzzle maybe going to be? Joey, there's a lot of receivers, defensive linemen, even some offensive linemen, tight ends, running backs, assortment, safeties, corners, all that. Lots of good players in this draft. In your dream world, Broncos maybe are picking 16 to 20, let's say, in that range. The player that walks across that draft or walks across that stage, first round of the draft, plays what position? Joey Richards.
It's not ideal. It's not ideal. I think the receiver class, I want to preface it. This receiver class, there's not a bunch of definite guys that I think should be going super early. Even like Luther Burden, who a lot of Broncos country is looking at out of Missouri, very much a yak guy, completely doesn't really know how to run a route yet, right? I think all of these guys are moving up the draft board simply because there isn't a wide receiver one type in this draft. Maybe one develops into that, one maybe even become that. But right now, that would be my number one focus. It's just I don't know who I love there, right? So I think I'm big on the Broncos should draft almost every single year where the draft is the most talented. I think in the first round where you're going to get the most bang for your buck is across the defensive line right now. I just think that's where you get the most bang for your buck. It's going to be on the defensive line. And I'll say in a dream world, they still somehow end up with Caleb Johnson and Gunnar Helm. Those are like two of my favorite guys. I think they would be perfect on the Broncos this year. I would fall in love if something like that came to fruition for the Broncos.
I started lighting up when Joey said that because that was kind of the answer I was looking for. I haven't started my in-depth work yet, but hearing people like Dane Brugler or Nate Tice, just early projections about what this draft class looks like. Round one, that's where defensive line is really strong. Broncos could use some help there. DJ Jones, good chance he's gone this offseason. Especially if they re-sign Zach Allen, do a big deal. Malcolm Roach, how long do you want to rely on that? And then you can get day two's full of awesome running backs and awesome tight ends and awesome receivers too. There might not be those like top 20 guys we've seen in past classes, but you can load up with weapons in that range. So that's kind of, it's crazy. For a while, I've just been like, get Bo whatever freaking help you can in the first round. Now I'm kind of with you, Joey. Let's get a nice piece on that defensive line. Let that keep rolling. And then on day two, rather, there's a lot of talented pieces the Broncos could add around.
Yeah. And, I was talking, shout out to Nick Kendall. Nick Kendall was telling me, he was saying that Chris Godwin injury is probably a little more or not as serious as what people are saying. So imagine in a world, right? The Broncos go out there and sign a Chris Godwin type player at wide receiver to complement a Courtland Sutton. I think that wide receiver 3 role would be up for grabs. And I think the Broncos right now, already on roster, have plenty of guys to fill a role like that. Then you go out there on offense, you draft your tight end, you draft your running back. Now
don't you tease me, Joey. Don't you tease me with that. That would be just, it would warm my little heart up to this even more so if that was the decision they made. I think it's a smart one.
I love it. I love it. Let's go. I'm excited for the future. I'm excited to talk draft and not talk quarterback. Thank God.
King Ray says Aston Gente. Yeah, I mean, if you're in a position to, you're dumb not to. But I don't know if the Broncos are going to be in position to. It would just be crazy. It'd be like one of those things where you spend a little more on the luxury car. And I mean, by a little, I mean a lot, simply because of the talent and what he's going to be able to do for a very long time. Guy scares me. All right, guys. That'll do it for our Monday show. We've been talking nonstop. It was a great game to review. I'm glad we're all so happy. I don't remember the last time I felt this way. So this is exciting stuff. Let's keep it rolling. We'll be back at you as a trio on Wednesday. Maybe, I don't know Zach's life. He might be here. He might not. You get to find out along with us. And on Tuesday, you have the altitude adjustment guys. Mario Vitanzi, Patrick Keote, Fullfield Reed will be coming at you on Friday. So keep your eyes peeled, your ears open. Go on over to letstalkbroncos.com, bookmark the page, subscribe to our channel, like the show right now, drop a comment, tell me what you liked about that game on Sunday. And Joey, you have anything to add?
Let's go Buffs. The Buffs are awesome. By the way, they're amazing.
The Buffs are awesome.
I think everyone should watch the Buffs. And then following the Buffs, I think everyone should go talk Buffs at Let's Talk Buffs with Carter Dillon and I, where we are breaking down film constantly and doing a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Please do that. Go over to Let's Talk Buffs. Go like that channel as well. If you don't like Buffs content, just go watch a video and support a Joey. Because according to Mike Carmelini, it's just natural to him. It rolls off the tongue. It's too good. Also, Zach Seegers, Fairview is going down.